All right. Hello, TikTok. Getting some things turned on. Do not mind me. Okay, let's upload a photo here. Documents downloads. Okay. Oh, hold on, y'all. Hold on a second. Hold on. Okay, I had to fix the light set up in the back. That required me to bend over. I need y'all looking at all that. Okay. Let's see. Oh no, what happened to our Peter Pan view? There we go. Freak. Let's lock that in place. How's that? I think that works, actually. Let me see. Maybe Peter Pan, if it's up there, you guys can see it really well. And I think you'll be able to see the chat really well, too. I'll just lock it in place like that. There we go. Okay. So that's it for TikTok. Oh, let me see. Start. Whoopsie. Custom. No, that's not a custom combination. And why did this just die? Did that really not charge? Speaker. Yes, there we go. Start. Excellent. Okay, hello, everybody. Excellent. I am getting us all set up. I'm also going to be on Patreon, but ignore that link. It's for recording purposes only. Because, you know, I need to be able to... Hello, Wig. Anytime I use people's usernames, I always feel extra silly. But hello, Wig. I'm going to start saying it with, like, a slight accent. Everything said with a British accent sounds whimsical, and we're about to find out why that is both disturbing and, also, for some reason, factual. Hello, Josh. Let me see. I am going to, find out if my actual headphones, they didn't charge? Are you serious? My left headphone only has 5% charge, even though it was in here the same time with the right one. That's at 100%. That's fine. Can you guys hear me okay? I think you can. I gotta stop leaning in now. You could buy that in real life too. Oh, that actually does help. Let me see. So I told you guys the Patreon live is for recording only. Feel free to look at it on there if you really wanted to. I'm not even going to send out an email notification. Simply because and there's no chat on there and stuff like that. Simply because it's for recording only. Just for the lecture part. Ooh, because we're going to have that recorded. We'll have this one recorded. This one's, the Zoom is going to be for members only. So when that gets uploaded, that's members only. But the lecture part of the recording, that'll be for everybody. And that's what's going to be filming on Patreon right now. And then, of course, you can watch live on TikTok, the lecture part as well. That one gets broadcasted everywhere. It'll also go as a podcast episode, things like that. I think we figured out a good way. That way we can all participate in the discussion on Zoom. I just don't know why I was being so silly about Zoom before. Maybe it would have solved everything. I was just really holding out for what's this thing called? Patreon Live. There we go. I'm making sure everybody gets a chance to pop in. And I think we can get started in about 3 minutes. But until then, what I was going to say. Oh, yeah. Uranus and Gemini. Has anybody else, has anyone else experienced the miraculousness of this energy? Oh my goodness. I feel like I've just been in a whirlpool of absolute creativity because it's out of Taurus, which I have my Sun, my Venus, and my Mercury all in Taurus. So, like, you can understand that I've been going through it for the last 7 years. Oh my God. I feel like I got my wings, though. And now I can fly and I can zoom around and do all sorts of stuff. Because, you know, all of those areas were being, you know, I'm a very, like, traditional, conscientious, like, very rooted in, and, and moving slow. I have a lot of Taurus aspects to me. Okay, if I'm gonna make a movement, it's because I've already considered all the aspects of it, and I'm very sure of that movement. And I can do that really quick because naturally I have my Mars in Gemini, so that makes it a bit faster for me than it does the usual Taurus placements and stuff. And because I have so many things working for me, that it offsets that. But Uranus in Taurus for 7 years, oh my God, I felt like everything was a fight. Okay, everything was a fight. Everything, absolutely everything. And by a fight, I just mean like my literal existence seemed to be in juxtaposition with the natural laws of things. And then it all turns out it wasn't the natural law of things at all. It was just all of these different systems that other people were participating in, and I didn't even know that. I've always been very much outside of systems, and I speak about that very openly and stuff like that. So then a lot of people who I guess were opting into different systems of thought that were very limiting, that they probably knew better than, but still chose to do anyways for desperate reasons or whatever. Yeah, all that stuff had to get flushed out of my like sphere, my auric field, because it was very distracting, to say the least. Also, it seemed to be like a waste of my energy being around people who were just hell-bent on being stupid sometimes. So I went through it for 7 years. Oh my God. Everything got scrutinized. And now that it's in Gemini, I feel like I can finally move around a lot faster. I don't have to like side-eye everything. That being said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit start. I think this is us for now. I know we're less people than usual, and that has a lot to do with the fact that we've switched over to Zoom. And, oh, pardon me, and probably a few people are either confused about that or maybe not. But we're going to get moving as we talk about Peter Pan. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit start on this Patreon live. Hopefully the sound works on it. Be absolutely horrendous if the sound didn't work. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Book Club. I'm just now letting everyone know we are now doing Book Club on Zoom for our discussion members, okay? So I'm live on Zoom right now with our members and also live on Patreon and TikTok. On Patreon and TikTok, these are for recording purposes only, okay? You guys can feel free, listen to the lecture. I do a lecture and then we dive into discussion, so I probably won't be able to get to too many comments and stuff like that. But if you do want to join us for a discussion at Book Club, please do head over to the Patreon. You can sign up as a member and you will have access to the Zoom link and you can participate. It's so much fun. We've been doing Book Club for about 2 years now, and we've read maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 books or so. We like to break them up. We did Women Who Runs with Wolves. I think that took us about, I think we did that for the whole year. We broke that up, like each section. We took one chapter a month. And I think that was the best pacing to do on that, because those stories just unfold. And when you sit in a fairy tale and the analyze, the critical analysis of it that Estes does for a whole month, okay, it unpacks an awful lot in your nervous system. A lot of times what most people don't have a problem of not having enough information, it's the not processing what's there. And we're going to get into that kind of topic here with Peter Pan, because this book, I'm still like, over 500,000 people have seen my video about Peter Pan where you all know I'm extra and I do a lot of hyperbolic speech for sensational purposes, and because it keeps me giggling on the inside, and I'm not doing this if I'm not laughing. But you all know I made a very sensational take. I was like, what do you mean Peter Pan's about? And then I list all of these wild things that happen in Peter Pan. And a lot of people were like, that's, did we read the same book? That's not in the book. That's no, that couldn't be, or this or that, or no, it's just this, it's just a whimsical tale, things like that. Meanwhile, I'm like, well, there's some actual references here that I think are worth actually looking at, and most people, they stop watching, or they stop paying attention after the initial reading as kids and stuff like that. Oh, I'm seeing the comments in the comment section here on Zoom. Sorry, y'all. I was busy. I was looking at the participants and make sure that we had enough people. Okay, I go by in real life too. You just hear me just fine. I'm gonna read the comments in just a second, but yeah, we tend to look at a lot of these stories that were peddled to children over the past century or so with a lot of without much thought. Mostly because the last time you read it or heard of it, you were probably a kid. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of thought do you really need to put into Peter Pan and Tinkerbell and all that kind of stuff? Anywhere between the ages of like 5 to 12, at around to be totally honest, at around 8, 9, 10, a lot of children in America specifically tend to age out of fairy tales, and they start entering into more complex media simply because of the types of media that are available to children. And when we look all the way at our current times today, even children today are having a hard time accessing media because there's so much of it, so many different channels in which you can access it, that it becomes a privilege, right? Not everyone has streaming services, and that's about the only place that you can someone said the Zoom chat doesn't work. Oh, it doesn't? It doesn't. I'm seeing people in the Zoom chat. I'm seeing people chat in the Zoom chat. Hold on. Let me look and see. Yeah, let me see. I don't oh, that was the wrong button. Oh my goodness, Zoom is so complicated now. Like I've been through the different iterations, but like I didn't really use it so much during COVID, because I didn't really have to. Well, I did, but I didn't have too many reasons to. So it's a bit, it's all like super complicated now. Like so many different options and things you can do. But yeah, it's working. Yeah, try it again. Just try logging in and trying yours again. But it's working for others, so I'm not so sure. I binged the third of your Peter Pan series today. Love your brain, thank you. So yeah, when we talk about Peter Pan, or we talk about the stories from yonder, right? And we look at current today, where do children access these things? Usually Disney Plus has a lot of the fairy tales adapted in the 21st century, which has been adapted for capitalism, right? So it strips it of all of the negative things and leaves all the whimsy. In other words, maybe a lot of you, some of you may be too young to remember, but a lot of you may remember really well when Disney had to go through all of their material and remove racism from it, remove all of these harmful aspects of it. And some materials went into the vault and will never come back ever again because of how egregious it is. And so a lot of these fairy tales were the first attempt to remove that. And then a lot of stuff still stayed, right? But then, so Disney, from this manuscript to, let's say, the Disney adaptation, these are two totally different adaptations. One of them has Peter Pan as a very malicious figure. Actually, he's less malicious in the published version. Apparently, Barrie's notes, he was far more malicious before before it reached publication 1911. We're talking about when he wrote it out by hand, right? He edited it for Peter to be a little bit less bad. And then, but like, we have to take into account that fairy tales are used to teach children about the real world. And so if this fairy tale is Barrie's like pretend with the 5 I think it's about 5 kids, right? The Davies boys. This is where Peter kind of came out of that. He said, funny enough, in a note in one of his notebooks or something, that Peter was what happened when he rubbed all 5 of them together like savages do matchsticks to make fire. Yeah. So you have to ask yourself if that's his mind frame, and he's making fairy tales for these boys to experience the real world, and what happens when you don't grow up, what happens if you do. It's all a little coquettish, but at the end of the day, it's also extremely eye-opening about what the world looked like what world they were navigating mentally speaking, right? And I want to be very specific when I say this, is that when I say the world, I'm not saying what was, I mean the world view. And I will do my best to make sure I say that instead. But we have to ask, what worldview are they navigating? And in this particular case, the British colonial or British imperial worldview that was kind of starting to come apart. British imperialism was gonna take a fall. What, 8 years after this would be World War One, and that's the beginning of the end for the European empires, right? So like they're about to come tumbling down, but right before they come tumbling down, this is the worldview that not only men like Barry had, as in a male who has aged, right? But the worldview that was being bestowed onto children. This is a gift unto children, is like a blueprint of the world. And it's, what world is Barry's worldview looking at? Well, it's North America. Who goes to North America? Who goes over to the seas? At this time, Treasure Island was huge, and very influential. I want to read that one. I have to admit, I've only ever seen Treasure Island, Muppet Treasure Island. A lot of the like European folklore and stuff like that. As a kid, I didn't like Grimm's and all, I didn't like the Disney stuff either. I thought it was too dark and too sweet, and all of it was weird. And until the Muppets, Jim Henson really did it for me, I guess. Except for the Dark Crystal was really disturbing to look at. But anyways, you know, it's the animatronics sometimes. Sometimes it's a hit and sometimes it's a miss for me. You know, puppets, either or. But I really enjoy Rizzo and Jacques is Jacques the, you know, the prawn shrimp guy. I find him funny. He's resurfaced in memes recently on TikTok. Oopsie. Oh, there we go. Yeah, he's resurfaced recently. Oh, come on. I hit play. Oh. Okay, there we go. Sorry, y'all. So now it's got to record. See, I got to get a new camera. But anyways, yeah, I enjoyed the shrimp guy so much. Anyways, so Jim Henson was funny to me, and yeah, I've watched Treasure Island or Muppet Treasure Island, but I've never read the actual book, and it was so influential in so many spaces as far as like children's stories and stuff like that. But this your internet connection is unstable. Oh, is that me? Is that me? Is that one of my students? I'm so sorry. Okay. I just saw like a sign. Okay. But anyways, Muppet Treasure Island is a classic. Before I dive in even more, let me go back and look at these really quick. It's nice. My Lilith is in Taurus, second house. Made a kick-ass collage today. And yes. Art. Sun and Gemini 11th. Ooh, and well, I wrote a few pieces, published 3 zines, and started an event series. Oh my goodness. Oh, wait, hold on. For the summer, yeah. So I feel inspired and no urge to do things that are not aligned. Exactly. So that's beautiful. See, that's Gemini energy right there, isn't it? It's like, oh, and Josh, you're really going to enjoy it as a publisher. Oh my goodness. I feel like it's only good times for us right now. Oh, 5 placements in Taurus. Yeah, especially after that. I'm telling you. You're probably going to feel a real big kick up here, especially with ideas and just easy flow. Just like it's almost like things are being built. Man, it's kind of like you know, I'm thinking of Fantasia with Mickey Mouse, and I'm thinking of all the magical scenes where someone said da da da, and like everything just kind of goes in order and comes, and then boom, it's done. You know, it's like a magical orchestration where the magic organizes everything and builds the castle, and now the castle's there. That's kind of like the energy of Uranus. It's like the tornado and the mental body. Nothing is rooted in the mental. So what does a tornado do? Well, in this energy, it whirls things together, it moves things together, but because mental energy is so you can manipulate it by mental frameworks, the energy just swirls through and it does what you ask it to do. So it's, man, it's such great magician energy. So I just wanted to mention that. I grew up on the real Grimm's fairy tales. Yeah, see, Juniper Tree was my favorite one. I didn't start reading and liking them until I was about after 12. That's when I started to get into them. But the Juniper Tree was one of my favorites. Rubs them all together. Hail gross. Already before we begin to the words out. Yeah, it was already gross, right? Muppet Treasure Island. My moon is in Gemini and I can't stop expressing my emotions with clarity. I love it. I'm telling you, everything gets better. I'm telling you. Uranus and Taurus was a terrible fucking time. Only because air on the ground like that, yeah, it's not fun at all. There's hardly any fun that comes out of it. And I think we experienced that. Okay, so with Peter Pan, I can't because there is no link. There is a link. The access link, if you go into the collections, book club collections, or just go to your email to one of the last email that you got from the Midnight Solar Society, Peter Pan Book Club, Session 1, Chapters 1 through 9. That will be the subject line. And there's a link in there for you there. And if you still have a hard time finding the link, you can always go to the collection, the book club collection, and the start here, the very first post in the book club collection. And at the top of that post is the Zoom link, okay? So just so that you know, so you can find it, the Zoom link. I can't because, yeah. But you mean that you were clicking the link and it wasn't opening? Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. Let me see. Yeah, no, see, it's opening for me. What's going on, Bree? I feel like, Bree, maybe Peter Pan might not be in the cards for you. I don't know. That's a little weird. It's a little weird that it's doing all that. Because, like, it's working on this side. You get what I mean? But just keep at it. Let me know what happens. And in the worst case, you know, well, geez, yeah, I don't know. Well, worst case, well, I mean, you're here listening to it on TikTok. You can be here. But, yeah. So, with Peter Pan, let's jump back into it. Davies is writing during the time period of it's the 1900s, okay? Oh, yeah, Bree made it. Oh. Okay, good. Oh, yeah, we see you. You made it in here. Okay. See if you can type something into the chat. And if that's working for you. But, yeah, this is the early 1900s, and this is, oh, we see you. Hi. Yay, we're glad we glad it's in the works. Maybe it was just a little bit of a kink in some technological system. But when you think back to what life must have been like and I want you all to keep in mind that life is just as complex today as it was then, and was then as it is today. So if you were working class, you probably don't have much to think about besides the day-to-day life. Okay, so by the working class, I mean if you are in a system and you're being extrapolated. Remember, in the 1900s, these local systems were a lot harder, and local ideologies. So the way that you think, it's a lot harder to be creative in thought and to think outside of the box, and also far more potent if you do. So in other words, if you think out of the box, people will either crush you or you're going to soar and become a legend in the Western world, okay? It's either one or the other. That's why in the Western world, look at all the legends. All of them tend to be white men, right? That's why, because everyone else got crushed. You know what I mean? All the women who were thinking out about crushed. And the only way that they weren't crushed is if they skated by through some strange variant. So Jane Austen, think of Jane Austen. How did she skate by into our world and into our collective consciousness in the Western world? As a romance writer. She's not a romance writer. She doesn't write romance. A romance appears and is a topic of conversation, but she writes about emotional intelligence. She writes about social interactions and social silhouettes is kind of the word that I'm trying to get. But she writes about all of the dark underpinnings in the soul. Her and Dickens aren't very different, except for sometimes Dickens cared more about systems than she did. Dickens had access to systems that she didn't have indoor access to. But if Jane Austen had access to a courthouse, she probably would have also had a bleak house under her belt. You get what I'm saying? If she had access to the pulpit besides her father, she'd probably have some deep spiritual thing going on too. In other words, she was somebody who was able to look at what was in her environment and write about it really well. And to reduce her to romance writer is crazy. How about the Bronte sisters? They didn't write about romance. They wrote about tortured people in cults. You know what I mean? One of them wrote about domestic violence. You know, like they wrote about all sorts of serious drama topics, right? Topics of drama. But I would beg to differ to trip over Wuthering Heights and call that a romance. Right? Like, doesn't somebody end up in a grave? It's a little odd. It's like, where is the romance, right? This is all tortured, and torture and romance. I mean, sometimes those things, those topics do come up, right? Like romance can be a wide umbrella but the umbrella that is wide under romance has different names, like drama, mystery, thriller, right? Like we we have other names when the umbrella kind of tends or becomes something else. And sometimes it is about the lens, like, but I know that I'm mincing things, or like, I'm picking up on the finer details of how do we categorize works of art. But the point is that if you weren't a white man who lived in the genteel class or more, right? If you couldn't get yourself out of the working class, or you weren't prominent in that working class, like Dickens was technically in the working class, but he was very prominent, right? And he worked in words. He worked in a space that served him, in publishing and in the newspaper and stuff like that. And so if you weren't in the right place at the right time, and you didn't play the exact right part, you did not get to be legendary. You got to be crushed. And I think Carl Jung really maps that out for us when we talk about the subconscious, which I swear to God, all of this is related to Peter Pan. But Carl Jung maps that out a lot for us when he talks about the subconscious, and a lot of his case studies were people who could see the subconscious workings in their society, and that disturbed them an awful lot, because when you can see things that other people can't see because they're blind to it, their ideologies don't map for that, then you become like a target, right? You get crushed, in other words. So a lot of the women fit into that category, obviously. And like I said, unless a woman could somehow skate by under some predetermined category like romance writer, it just really wasn't in the cards for them. So Barry at that time, when we're talking about this time where it's an empire, people who are different get crushed, and only white boys who are of the genteel, meaning you don't really work. Okay, you have inheritance. Okay, you have property. And if you have inheritance and property, if you don't have inheritance and property, one of your siblings does, and you live there, and they kind of take care of you. Okay, once you have to get a job, you're part of the working class. So you have to be in the genteel class. You don't need a job. Okay, but it's getting pretty tight. You can be there. The darlings technically fit into the genteel class when it becomes more industrial and people start working. So Barry grew up right before that was happening, and he's writing as it's happening, as some of the genteel are getting jobs. Okay, they're bankers and lawyers and all that kind of stuff, and that's because of all of the mass migration, all of the global markets picking up. And by global market, I just mean all of the European colonies are trading with each other. So Marxist is also talking during this time period, I think, right? The 30s? Maybe no, not this time period. Hold on. I introduced Marx. We're way too early. Hold on. Marx. Published. Let me see. No. I might be right here. Hold on. Me on display. Karl Marx. Yeah. Look. Before. I'm sorry. He was way before this. He was 1848. That's crazy. I guess his stuff didn't really get... Oh, that's right. I was thinking about the impact of his work. Sorry, that's the 30s. Anyways, so yeah, no, in the 1848, remember, Marx was writing the manifesto where he's seeing the global market building and stuff like that, and Barry is, like, participating as one of the, I guess, new generation who's in the industrial world. Okay, but he's part of the empire where he's at the top. And now Barry also has an education, or at least he has an education in the arts, which means he's still connected to let me put it this way. Barry's still very much connected to, like, mythology, legends, adventure, whimsy, and the root of things. Because not only is one, he's Scottish, even though he's Calvinist and they don't really participate in all of that, but also he's an artist. And artists naturally have to learn symbolic literacy. Symbolic literacy gives you emotional intelligence above non-practicing artists, because the art, what is art? Art is the act of observing life, and when you start observing life, you're observing the universe at work. So, who said it? There's so many different artists who say this, but they say the thing about art is when you stop and you stare at something long enough to see the divine. to see God. That's the point of art. So an artist naturally is an alchemist. An artist naturally is that thing. And every time you practice doing art, making art, being an artist, you are practicing the tools of alchemy, the tools of symbolic literacy. You're practicing those things blindly or with consciousness. When you are when you start taking your art seriously in an academic way, then you can start learning those tools consciously and then refining them and stuff. And so Barry, because he's an artist, he does have symbolic literacy, and he's very talented, honestly. But we do have to see that he is in a world where the ideology is pretty fixed. Okay, it's very imperial, and he's giving you a very fresh lens on what life looks like and what life looks like and how you introduce it to the freshest mind, right? Because he's talking to children. Also, at this time, Victorian childhood is still a new thing. Childhood in the West specifically is just now being developed. Now, I have a lot of suspicions that because of the impacts of being stripped of indigeneity in Europe and stuff like that, and how long that was going on between the Romans and their interactions there after being colonized and all that kind of stuff, that childhood and initiation severely goes away. Let me put this down. It severely gets hindered in European life. Now, I'm also reading Of Water and the Spirit by Malidoma Some, Of Water and the Spirit. Of Water and the Spirit. I'll probably leave that in the type up of this down below, right? So in the Patreon post when I submit the replay, so that you guys can get the title of this book. So I'll make sure to link it. But in this, it talks an awful lot. So this is in 1958, and it talks an awful lot about from his generation, his father's generation, and his grandfather's generation. And getting information about what coming in contact with colonialism has been like for these indigenous people, their way of life, and their ideology and how they see the world. And if there's one thing that can be said from every single region that I've looked at so far, is that everyone outside of the West can see that the West lacks spiritual development, that they lack the tools necessary to practice it properly, and that causes so many different issues that are outside of their worldview. And so this is one of them, because childhood isn't a new invention. Oftentimes I do hear in America that childhood was the new invention in the Victoria Age, and it's like in the West, but in other spaces, right, like in West Africa. So this is like Burkina Faso, which is near Ghana. Childhood is a sacred time before initiation. Initiation is the standpoint into adulthood. I also have over here Voices of the First Day. It's an Aboriginal dream time. So the anthropologist Robert Lawlor. Jesus, there's two L's. Lawlor. Lawlor. But yeah, Robert Lawlor, he spent an awful lot of time with Aboriginals and writing and talking about their worldview and how they see things in hopes of opening up to the West a way of fixing itself. He also he's really hostile towards Western practices, which says a lot. But yeah, so the concept here is that childhood is actually extremely sacred. It's an extremely sacred time period, and preserving the innocence of childhood until initiation, especially Somé talks about it, is absolutely tantamount. Like, he came in contact with the spiritual world when he was about 3 or 4 or something like that, and his mother was like, don't tell anybody. Because if he did, they might have to initiate him way early before he's even, usually about 13 is when it usually starts, because it's about the onset of puberty. And initiation is a journey itself that ends after a period of time that then takes someone into their adult years. And so it's like even the journey is a time period that's understood and kept and mapped out. And there's so many different rituals that go into. And when we talk about rituals, they're not ceremony. Ceremony is to validate what's actually happening, but the ritual is, like I said, that is the ceremonial validation of other things, and it's the other technology that the West is removed from. It sees the ceremony, it practices ceremony, but it doesn't understand the underpinnings, the science behind it, right? So when I talk to you guys about the four bodies, and I say you have a spiritual, emotional, mental, and a this body, and these are energy frequencies, right? These planets do send out vibrational frequency waves. They impact you. You have a biofield, right? I'm building out vocabulary for you to understand when someone says, you know, collect rainwater and sit over it and X, Y, and Z. The rainwater has certain molecules in it that are going to interact differently and impact you differently, and this, that, and the other. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that goes into it scientifically, and when you don't know that part, but you just hear go collect rainwater and sit it down and sit over it for 3 days, you start to think that someone's just doing something silly. But that, I think someone's doing something silly is a sign of ignorance, right? We don't know why they're doing it or what it is. And when other people can't explain to you the science, it's the same way that you can't explain how your phone sends text messages to someone else across the world. And I mean, like, how does the bits go from your phone when they disappear? How do they go through the air somewhere else? Explain the radio waves. Like, if we can't do that, we can't expect other people to be able to explain the scientific underpinnings of all of their ceremonial rituals. The same way that I can't explain my ceremonial ritual of picking up my phone, texting someone after I've sent them an email to let them know that I've sent an email. Why that's even necessary. Why that's necessary, why would I do it, and how it happened, right? It's like, it's technology. You cannot explain it so in depth. So we see that the Victorians here, they don't have that level of understanding of themselves spiritually. And so what do people do when they're new and they're fresh at it? And I mean, this is one hell of an answer. So anyways, I've talked enough, I think, about a little intro. Oh, a few things I want to mention. These are all things you can probably find on Wikipedia, but I'm also reading, let me grab it really quick. I've mentioned so many things, I might as well have had these links up. Andrew Birkin is a biographer. No, not, and what is that? Andrew Birkin. There we go. He wrote the biography J.M. Barrie and the Lost Boys in 1979, and he still holds, I think, the what's the word that I'm looking for? He still holds the the stick, the trophy, the number one, the golden ribbon, whatever the fuck I'm trying to say. He still holds that in as far as biographies on James Barrie. Now, also Birkin is a screenwriter and a director of, so he was working on the play at the time, or he was there. His mom, I think, used to sing for cinemas and stuff like that. So he was in the theater field and stuff, and he just so happened to know a lot about James Barrie. So people called him the like, he was the copy link address. Here we go. I'm gonna send it to you guys here. Oh, Jesus Christ, why does it look like that? Fuck. Okay. Andrew Birkin book. Fuck. Jesus Christ. Sorry, y'all. I'm terrible at this right now. Okay, save. There we go. So we got the Andrew Birkin book right there. And then what else did I want to show you? Some Molidoma of Water and Spirit. There's another one, but I'm going to link that one to you too. One of them will be an Amazon link. I'm not telling you to buy it from Amazon. It's just the first one that's there, of Water and the Spirit by Some. Okay. So I just so we have that there, and I know y'all got it. Okay. Yeah, so why did I mention that really quick? Oh, yeah, Birkin. So, from that, we kind of know that Barrie had a really troubling childhood. He grew up Calvinist. His mom lost her favorite son at 14. The fact that it's a favorite and people used to practice favorites to that extent should tell you everything that you need to know about the household that Barrie grew up in. He was, I think, 6 when his brother died, so then he spent the rest of his time trying to live up to his 14-year-old brother. A lot of people think that that's where he got the idea of Peter Pan. I think that is probably the origin of Barrie's, he had a brush-in with death. Anytime death comes to visit you, you gain more awareness of subconscious world, because death is when things go from living and they disseminate into the unliving, right? The undying, the undying realm. That opens up a lot of portals. Okay, so I'm just letting you guys know that in my community that I've been trying to figure out for a while. Thank you, thank you. Oh my God! Today, thank you. You just unlocked something in my brain that explained a lack. I'm so glad. Okay, sorry, everybody. I had to drink my Capri Sun. Okay, but anyways, just understand that Barry, this is definitely an origin time for him, because death opens up portals, and when portals are opened up, especially in front of young children are, like I had just mentioned, Some, he saw, he was trying to hunt a little rabbit, and that's when he saw a little figure, like a little fairy that was like, "What's your problem, kid?" Right? And he told his mom. His mom was like, "Don't tell anybody." He had a brush-in with death. Essentially, it was really close, and something could have happened. He could have put his hand down the wrong hole, been bitten by a snake. The point is that death comes, and death talks to us in many different ways. But a lot of people, especially in the West, are taught to keep a blind eye, or to turn away from death, to be terrified of death, to not grieve death properly. And in fact, we get a funeral scene here where we learn the importance of processing out grief. And Black culture, especially Black Indigenous culture, people are known for being extremely vocal, just like throwing themselves everywhere when they are filled with grief. And it is because you have to exercise and purge out that open channel. When someone that you know, or death is nearby, or you are interacting with death, you get hit with so much. I don't think you guys, I shouldn't say you guys, but I don't think humans in general really understand it. When I was about 13, my stepfather died. And I had another run-in with death. Well, I had one with a car accident. It was very close. It was a run-in, but it's almost like I'm not going to say that. I don't like to say that part out loud, but I see a lot. But anyways, I also had a very, very close call with someone very close to me, very sick, and didn't know whether they would make it past Christmas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've had a lot of experiences where the portal is totally open, and most people, I don't think a lot, unless you've seen it yourself, you do not understand how people react to death. It is so unconscious and subconscious. People turn off, they turn a blind eye, they turn away, they act out in so many grotesque ways, and they're totally unaware of it, And it's a lack of processing grief. People who repress emotion, repress disappointment, especially if you sit with a lot of anger and spite. In fact, right here, I think Some says it, and I highlighted it too, and it was this. A spirit who is not passionately grieved feels anger and disappointment, as if their right to be completely dead has been stolen from them. And so I would just want to add what Some is talking about. He's talking about, like, when you don't grieve a dying spirit, that spirit becomes angry. But I also need everyone to totally understand that what he may be unaware of, but what I want everyone to be aware of, because I am aware of it, you die too. You die too. When someone dies, or someone leaves your life for forever, and it's worse when they're not physically dead, because you don't know when that forever is until someone dies. That's why ghosting feels very unsettling to people and leaves longer lasting impacts of like mental and emotional distress than a clean death, right? It's because you die too, and so your spirit needs to purge. You've got to let that spirit die, but people hold it in, and so then comes the deterioration inside of them. So you have to understand, Barry's mother is probably deteriorating on the inside, and so May's writing about this, and he was born in 58. Okay, so he's at least 50 years before Barry wrote Peter Pan, and that's something like what, maybe 20 or 30 years. I don't know how old Barry was when his brother died, but you have to understand that it was very common and commonly understood here that at let's say it says So it would be improper for a villager to display the kind of restraint and solemnity seen at Western funerals. So the idea here that knowing that, so refraining from weeping wrongs the dead. That he knew that in Western funerals there is a restraint. That there is they practice. It's an improper stoicism. Like Marcus Aurelius would say, not that you were supposed to repress it. He says that you should just accept it. And accepting it doesn't mean that, like, and people think acceptance, they go to a dark place. And it is like, no, you have to accept that they are dead, which means that you have died too. That means you have to process it out properly. And it's that second step of what do you do afterwards that people are lost in. So for sure, Barry's brother dies. That opens up a portal, and then he's been haunted by the unprocessed energies of death ever since. That does lead you to be very witty. That does lead you to be very clever. It does lead you to see things other people don't see. And then Barry's is the Davies. These are the boys that he ended up hanging around, and well, go figure, because both their parents were about to die and they were going to be orphaned soon. So before that happens, of course, he ends up befriending the family. He takes them on vacations. He spends money on them. He takes them places. And then as they slowly die, eventually he gets governorship or guardianship over the children. But there's some contest to that, which that may not have been what was supposed to happen. They maybe were supposed to go, I think, with the nanny or something like that, and the nanny didn't like him. So that's another aspect. We'll get into it about the nanny and the dog in this book. But there's like a lot that goes on there. And so a lot of people say because he got married, I think before he ended up hanging out with the Davies kids, but he got divorced before he ended up, or after he took on their guardianship. So, and he was married for maybe, it was less than 10 years. It was about 7 years or something like that. And during that time period, apparently they didn't consummate the marriage. So there's rumors that about Barry's sexuality there that's also interplayed. And because his sexuality is interplay, and the queer community during this time is, just as dangerous as every other community, especially for boys and stuff like that, because of a lot of the performative and the lack of spiritual restraint and stuff. Because when you don't have spiritual restraint, you just assume that everything is yours to consume when you think yourself a god. And when you have the resources and the social credit to give yourself that power, right, in any given situation, any white man with any kind of resources has social credit at this time, and that can be expended upon all of the women and the children in the vicinity. So because of that, a huge aspect of this is violation of the spirit, which is, when you think about it, your creative energy is your spiritual energy, which is also sexual energy. So lots of sexual violations happen in spaces with where spirit is bankrupt. Because if you do not see the crimes that you're committing, you think other people can't see them too. That's the problem, is when when people deny that spirituality exists, they're allowing crimes against the spirit or sexual crimes to partake and to happen, because it is easier to just look away and say that it doesn't exist than to have to understand and develop spiritually. And also all of the ideologies go against it and stuff like that. It's a very nasty loop. So when you have somebody like Barry who's alive in a loop during this time, and people think that he's queer now, and then he's hanging around with a lot of boys, and the boys end up dying, and everything's tragic and everything's full of death, and Barry is a very witty and has a beautiful way with language. He's poetic, so he's artistic, right? It leads to an awful lot of very dark spaces very quickly. Like sometimes while I'm reading this, and I'll move into just very quickly some of the things that I noted, and then we're going to move into the actual discussion portion. But some of the things that I noted early on led me to, I noticed very quickly in his writing was spiritual, or the lack of spiritual restraint. So I'll use that in the beginning, when the narrator, which That when you're reading something and there's a narrator and the narrator is distant or has opinions of their own, right? Then we have a bit of a distance between us and the character. But Barry has a very interesting way of using the narrator and slipping into the thoughts of, say, Wendy. Sometimes he gets close to Wendy in ways that he doesn't get close to others. And so that also feeds into speculation about things. About why he visits her psyche more often than others. And I say that in terms of everything that we write is part of us, so it comes out of us. And so therefore this is Barry, all of them, everything, right? But then also, just because it's from him and it is him, he is influenced by what? And so this is where satire gets interesting, right? This is where duplicity gets interesting. He may be in, he may, these, everything in here may be from his worldview, but what is he being influenced by? I just spent a great deal of time telling you about some of the things going on in the world at that time, the atmospheres, who gets crushed, who gets to be a legend. Barry is Scottish, so he can be somebody, but not the head buddy, right? He can, yeah, like, let's not pretend like the Scottish aren't taking advantage of, and hadn't, I should say, at the by this point, they stopped after, but they had taken very much advantage of the slave trade, and those who were Calvinist, I would bet my bottom dollar, probably had more ties with slave trade than those who were indigenous. And so you have to understand that, like, he's coming from a background where he benefits in a lot of different ways from something he's never experienced, and his experience leads him to have access to spaces where even he is not 100% accepted. It's a very complex time, and the today's time period is just as complex, but people do have a lot more freedoms or the ability to move simply because we have technology that allows us to move more than people did back in the day, if that makes sense. Comparatively only. But anyways, one of the spiritual violations that I mentioned that I had picked up on, this was the immediate thing, is chapter 1, page like 1 or 2, I think. I think it's on page 1. Or the first page after. Yes, page 1. So, the way Mr. Darling won her was this. The many gentlemen who had been boys when she was a girl discovered simultaneously that they loved her, and they all ran to her house to propose to her, except Mr. Darling, who took a cab and nipped in first. And so he got her. Okay, so that's all it takes, right, is to get there first. So that says that Mrs. Darling is kind of stupid. She doesn't really care about anything except for who asked first. He got all of her, except the innermost box and the kiss. He never knew about the box, and in time he gave up trying for the kiss. Wendy thought Napoleon could have gotten it. But I can picture him trying and then going off in a passion, slamming the door. So, not only does he talk about the fact that Mrs. Darling's kind of stupid, all the other guy was a little bit more clever than her and all the other boys, so that's why he married her. So she was a prize, right? But he got it because he was clever. And more, like I said, more clever than her, because all it takes is just asking. So in other words, she doesn't have the same education as Mr. Darling. It was his pick. 1. 2, she's still more smarter than him because she's able to hide something that he can't access or see. So it just means that in the system, she's actually disadvantaged. Not stupid, she's disadvantaged, but she has the advantage. She has something that she can hide away. 2. 3, Wendy thinks Napoleon can get it out of her. What does that mean, right? Well, then we think about historically Napoleon. If we take him out of just the context of the guy who, the short guy who was going around trying to, rule the world for the French. You guys remember he used to send all those crazy love letters to that to his wife? She would respond with things like, "Oh my God, you're exhausting me," and he'd be like, "I'd throw myself in the ground and lick toads if it meant I could sniff your underwear." And it was like, what the fuck, Napoleon? What is going on with you? I don't know. He seemed like he was real in deep for love, but that was kind of the point, right? Is he was persistent. He just he has some sexual aspect to him. But also in France during this time was the only place that people like Oscar Wilde, who had just died 9 years earlier from Barry writing this, 5 years before the play came out. So, wait, no. Yeah, 2 years or something like that before the play came out. Anyways, so Wilde had just died essentially after being imprisoned for being queer, but before that he was living in Paris. Why? Because they had more relaxed laws. So this could be One, that he's just signaling that he thinks Napoleon's a funny guy, or two, is this mean that Barry's influenced by a space and a place and an attitude? What is he referencing, in other words? And in my particular space, this is when I say that's the moment that he tells you that this isn't just a children's story. On the surface, of course it is, and everyone's going to laugh at it and think that it's quaint and silly and stupid, but those who know what they're reading will know what they're reading. He's saying something. Now, what is he saying? That's left up for us to figure out, right? We'd have to do a lot more hunting, I think, than just noticing that he said something about Napoleon. Oh, and then 3, he does something very interesting where he tells us what Wendy thinks, but then he says he thinks something different. So he's separating himself from Wendy while also being in Wendy's mind, but then also making a lot of statements. This is somebody who, like, I just, I admire the writing so much because it's a stream of consciousness that's very intuitive and very fluid, but it also knows what it's doing. It's very, very smart. And so I just want to bring that up as we head into the discussion about this, because there's so much that is, that's very, like, red flag, right? A lot of people think that Neverland, or I should say the prevailing idea has always been that Neverland is a make-believe place in space, but it's not. We have right here on chapter 6 that Neverland is in the Caribbean. The kids are playing on a sugar plantation, right? Pickaninny, I'm sorry. That's a slur that I heard a lot growing up in Florida. That's used for black indigenous children. That's why I was like, this is the Caribbean. He talks about the more gentle natives, the ones that live in the Northeast, the Hurons and the Delawares, which are the Lenape and the Wendat tribe up there in like New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York, Maine, I think. And then the Wendat is like the Ontario, the Great Lakes area. So notably, those were the tribes that were the most friendly to those who first came over, right? That was first contact and stuff like that. And also, anyways, also, I think that they probably had other contact with maybe other, the Vikings and stuff like that. Anyways, the point that I'm making is that the Caribbean natives, this is where my people come from, are totally different than the ones in the Northeast. Go fucking figure. These are two totally different regions. Of course, they're going to be different people. One of them has access to like Mexico and the South America by boat, fairly close. You know what I'm saying? And is probably very much populated from the West African diaspora that came over on boats long before all of this shit was happening. And then, the Northeast is more populated probably by the, Asian descent, travelers and stuff who came over and migrated throughout and stuff. And then you've got the people who were just living here. Like, what is the human genome that was living here? You could probably find it somewhere in Mexico. I would really, I would bet my bottom dollar, you know what I'm saying? And then that, and that probably came from, who knows, maybe the Pacific. I don't know, but the point is that human beings have been traveling a very long time, and so of course they'd all be fucking different, right? Of course they'd all be different. So regionally speaking, we're looking at natives, black natives in the Caribbean and stuff like that, which is totally different, that whole area. I tell you guys all the time, I have a lot in my family from different areas and different. It's funny because you can tell the black people from different spaces, because we are all very fundamentally different. And I don't mean different, I mean different spaces within the U.S. alone. Like, I can tell people who came over, who probably came over from the slave trade itself, because that's a totally different experience than people who were here as native people. There's a totally different experience as people who came over afterwards. There's a totally different experience of the African diaspora that migrates over in the last few generations. Like, these are all literally different experiences and completely different worldviews. And the only way that you can really know that, right, is just by, I guess, like, paying attention, one. But, like, being in one of them is helpful, and also just learning about them. And then, and seeing how they, and following the history. So anyway, that was something that really came up, and but something else that I wanted to mention, especially when we look at Captain Hook and the pirates. Oh, geez. All the pirates come from the different immigrant diasporas, don't they? We've got an Irish pirate, an Italian, a Spanish pirate. I don't think there's a Portuguese one. I know that we have, I don't think there's technically a black one, although Hook is, he refers to Hook all the time as black and swarthy and stuff like that. But, that could just be Barry being very, it's hard to say in the 1900s, because how long have people been stripped? How long have diverse populations been stripped down through genocide and relocation and all that kind of stuff through the slave trade and stuff like that? So I don't know how, whether he's just talking about somebody who's got black hair at this point, or somebody who's a little from the Tuscan area, of Italy or something like that. It really is a throw up when we toss up when we look at the early 1900s. But the pirates, they create a very interesting thing. And then I wanted to just mention really quick is, and I have a funny little diagram of it here, is the experience. So this is Neverland. We've got Peter arrives, Peter Pan. And when Peter arrives, everybody starts spinning. And Neverland starts spinning like this. And I think that's so great that it's on this, right? It's dizzying, right? So when Peter Pan arrives to the island, all of a sudden the beasts start kicking up. And then when the beasts kick up, it says the Redskins start kicking up. And then the pirates kick up. And then the Lost Boys start running. And they run in a circle around this island over and over and over and over and over and over again. Just killing each other, doing this. As much killing happens, it seems like people are always there to be killed, right? So, last thing, and then I swear to God, we're going to go to the discussion. But last thing that I want to kind of put on everybody's mind as we open this up is that kind of something that I just said. If this is essentially the Caribbean, okay, and Barry is just having a fun time having these imaginative episodes with the Davies boys, who are really young. And remember, they're so young that they can be in their imagination and say all sorts of stuff and do, and they have no idea what they're talking about, no idea what they're thinking about, right? And Barry's, having a fanciful time, and he's writing all of this down, and he's having a lovely time playing make-believe with kids, right, all day. It's a thing. So if that's all happening, right, then what does that say about what Barry thinks about what's going on in America? Because we know that he's intelligent, right? Like, you can't have it two ways, that you are witty and intelligent and also completely daft and don't know anything about what's going on in the current world of affairs. Like, he doesn't need to be in America. All he has to do is just pick up a newspaper in his own hometown, right, in London somewhere. Like, he's in the literary field. I think he probably is aware of conversations. And remember, news travels way slower, so it's way more interesting when something happens, and you get to chew on it for, like, weeks and months before something new happens. So he can't be completely daft of all of the political implications and stuff like that. So I just want to keep that in mind as we jump into the discussion, because I think, I go back and forth all the time while I'm reading this. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this really is kind of like, I'm in the later chapters, we're in Neverland. I'm like, yeah, we've hit the kid stuff. But, like, what the fuck, Barry? What's going on with you? Like, this can't just be a warped worldview. And I go back and forth between that and what the fuck is this guy getting at? And then lastly, I believe... I said that like 15 times. Lastly, I'm going to leave you all with this. I just want to tell you that I went into this book, and I do this with every research book that I have. Anything that I'm doing, I always have like a question that's like a haunting that I have in my mind. So I just want on the record, I went into this, and my one true question, okay, as much as we're uncovering so many different things and looking at it through different lenses, my one true question is, what does J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan have to do with Robin Williams and his affair with the nanny? Yes, you all know that was my initial question. That was what my brain said when I looked at this book, and that's what got me reading. So I say that to highlight this. Sometimes you just need a reason of why you're curious and why you're interested. You don't have to make it. I know a lot of times people can get stuck when we talk about literature and we look at it from different angles. People want to be right. People want to have the right opinion. People want to know what is, and everything is very black and white. But what I'm telling you is that none of that's real. Like, all of it is speculation. We are always in speculation because the only thing that's real is what exists, right? And so therefore, how does it impact us? That's real. What can we pick up from the lenses? That is real. But just because we can see all of that doesn't mean that that is what is. It's just what came from it, Okay. And there's a very subtle difference. And sometimes the best thing to keep you grounded in that mind frame is when you have silly, curious things that lead you down rabbit holes, hold on to those, hold on to that. Let that be your anchor point to always remind you that it's not that fucking serious. I mean, so far I figured out, Robin Williams played Hook. That was probably the only Peter Pan adaptation I'd ever really watched besides Pan. In I think 2012 or something like that. But like, it's such a silly question, and it leads me to this place where I wonder a lot about what it takes in someone to resonate with a character, to resonate with a story across time, across universes. I know Michael Jackson has been coming up a lot in the zeitgeist as everything unsurfaces. We've got the whole Epstein files that has surfaced, and that happens on an island, and there's a lot of conversation about the Greek pantheon and Pan, and I'm pretty sure that this book has inspired so many. I talk about it on the TikTok when I say that the book inspired the concept of the Peter Pan syndrome, which is essentially the manosphere before we use the term manosphere. You should just call it Peter Pan syndrome, boy psychology, where people couldn't grow up. Peter Pan syndrome. Now it's manosphere, which I guess they're like the man. No, it's just how terrifying there are so many Peter Pans that they've become a sphere in themselves. They've left the island. They are now orbiting. They're orbiting what? Anyways. So yeah, this has a lot of impact, and that does bring up questions about resonance, right? What does it mean to resonate with wanting to never grow up? And is there something wrong with childhood and all of these kinds of questions? Or is everyone just looking at it the wrong way? Because, Robin Williams was also in the Dead Poets Society, and that talks about the story of being an artist and being cut off from art, that is something you're not allowed to do when you come into adulthood. You're not allowed to make up stories. You're not allowed to use your imagination. And the adulthood is a place where you give over your spirit, right? You cut off your spirit so that you can participate. But that isn't. And in fact, Malidoma Some brings up a really good point when he was talking to his grandfather. His grandfather was saying that back in the day, the white man would make people give up their sigils. Their sigils, or not their sigils, their fetishes is what they call them. But a fetish here, and I want you all to understand, is this is your spiritual core. So your connection to your ancestral realm, spirit. In other words, colonizers came over to Africa and said, you have to kill your god. And if you really want to understand what that's like, I just want you to think about anybody that you have a deep, intimate relationship with. And if it's your pet, if it's a person, I don't care. Someone who you recognize the essence of them, that's what they were asking. They were saying, turn your back on that. So, if you have a loved one and someone came up and said, hey, to live, you got to walk away from these people. And not just that, but you have to kill him and then walk away. You get what I'm saying? Like, that is the magnitude of what was being asked. And people who did died, all of them would just die very soon after. And that's because they had no sense of life and of will, and they became what? What happens when you become the person who kills yourself but still lives? You have no purpose, no meaning, so someone has to pour something into you, and that's how you become a cog in the machine. And so a lot of that is what is happening to the children of that time. They're becoming cogs in the machine. The darling children, Wendy, she wants to be a mother without having to actually be a mother, right? She doesn't even know what that would mean. The boys, they're not interested in growing up and doing what their father does. That's kind of the point. Peter Pan doesn't want anything to do with this whole cutting off to become a cog of the machine. But he's also a white boy who can, we'll just stick with the story. He's a boy. But remember, when we talk about Peter Pan syndrome, being white, being male, and having resources, the ability to travel back and forth overseas. That's what makes Peter Pan special, is that he can fly. He can move between realities. This means what happens to Peter when they're sleeping and he's not sleeping. Is it that Peter goes out and kills people, this, that, and the other? Or is it just that he can move between realities that the others can't? The rich boy who can go hang out with the poor kids, but then he also has a home with the rich people, that sort of a thing. He can go back and forth. So maybe he can go back and forth between a British identity and an American colonial identity. Maybe he can go back and forth between these worlds and navigate that, and that's what that signifies. And he is a fucking terrorist. It's his imagination. He gets to play in the world that he wants, right? And so therefore Peter Pan is in self and embodying himself as his own God, right, and privileges, but not everybody else also gets those privileges, and the only people who are still fighting for those in this book are the Redskins. You get Tiger Lily. She's somebody who they can't wife her. Even Peter feels the need to help her when she is, out of commission, so to speak. And so that speaks volumes, doesn't it? And sometimes, and I think there's a line here, that I highlighted just to bring this point home to you all, is that there's a point where sometimes the the Lost Boys and the Redskins will pretend to be each other. Do you guys remember that part? Oh no, this is when Peter's being unfair. Let me see. This is right when Tiger Lily gets captured. Here we go. So this is the home underground. So, at the Glutch, when victory was still in the balance, sometimes leaning this way and sometimes that, he called out, "I'm a Redskin today. What are you, Toodles?" And Toodles answered, "Redskin, what are you, Nibs?" And Nibs said, "Redskin, what are you, Twin?" And so on. And they were all Redskins. And of course, this would have ended the fight had not the real Redskins, fascinated by Peter's methods, agreed to be Lost Boys for that once. And so at it they all went again, more fiercely than ever. So the Redskins and the Lost Boys, they agreed to kind of just like dress up as each other and then go back in and battle. Like, okay, well, we're going to battle like you and you battle like us, which it kind of speaks to a sense of community, right? A sense of play between them, even though they are in fact enemies. And that is only, I think, because they recognize both of them are spiritually autonomous. That is the only connection that they have between them. It is not that they are friends. It is not that Peter is kind. It is not that he is practicing anything of empathy. It is just a recognition that both of them are free. And they refuse to be captured. And this is an island full of people who refuse to be captured. The pirates are the same way. They just kind of suck at it. They're sad. They're just delinquents, right? But they refuse to be captured. Nobody here really has any type of valiancy to them. And then, of course, we've got Tiger Lily. She runs around with a hatchet, you know what I mean? So, I hate to paint the picture that indigenous people are all like, we're all the best and we're great. No, some people will fucking kill you just because they don't like you. Like, that's just natural. That's humans. You know what I mean? Humans can come in a variety of... of packages, but the point here is that all of these human beings are here on this island because they refuse to be captured. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people on that island captured. We're just seeing the ones that refuse, which is why the beasts are also there too. But also the complexities of when you bring in imperialism on top of that. Some of them are allowed to have that, like Peter is allowed to have his freedom, but the others, they are not allowed to have their freedom. They fight for it, and there is a difference, and that's where the imbalance comes in, right? All right, so everybody, we're going to move into the discussion portion. Anybody who wants to be part of that, please go ahead and join the Midnight Scholar Society. We have a link to the Zoom. You can join us. You can also just join us next time. We're going to finish up Peter Pan, chapters 10 to the end, which I think is like 18 chapters. But 10 to the end, and we're going to read the rest. By the time I come back, I'm going to have read a little bit more of the biography so I can give you guys a little bit more insight on what I think is really going on underneath the surface, if I get any, right? I'm also going to try to read a little bit on the Victorian childhood. I'll probably have gone through more of Water and the Spirit, which seems to be a great companion to this for some reason, and we'll probably have a lot more to say on archetypes: the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. Obviously, if you have anything to say about the archetypes as we head into the discussion, please do. If you want to throw in some archetype language in there, oh my god, I'm gonna love it and eat it up. Probably get some ideas on my own too. So did you ever read what Virginia Woolf had to say? I went to go look for it, and I could not find what Virginia Woolf had to say. And I know I saw something. Now, it could have just been an offhand comment. It was while I was doing research on Nabokov. Nabokov, is that how you say his name? I've never said his name. A day in my life. Nabokov, yeah, Vladimir. Yeah, I always call him Vladimir because every time I see his last name, I'm like, Kov or Kov? Nabokov or Nabokov, right? So anyways, Vlad. I like to call him Vladdy. So, yeah, I was doing some research on Vladimir, and I just so happened to come across Virginia Woolf at that time, and she was saying something about like she was saying something about something else, and a quote about Peter Pan came up, and I was like, oh, that's so funny, and I just clocked it in my brain, but I did not like write it down, and so now I'm looking for it. I tried Googling for it, and I was like, well, of course Google's not going to find it. I guess I might have to resort to like asking I don't like to ask the AI about quotes because, like that's really pulling at straws, you know what I mean? But it might be able to find something. But I think it was a passing review, so it must have been published in in a review paper or magazine or something like that about the play, or about people were commenting on the bohemian atmosphere or something. I don't know. Oh, I'm gonna have to find it. But I will come back with that because it's still on my to-do list. Yeah. So next time we'll probably wrap it up with that, and then we will start in May, The Wizard of Oz. So I just want to keep everybody in mind with that. We're pairing it with our Uranus and Gemini. Oh, transit. It's fucking crazy. We're also pairing it with the concept of, this is like the American isekai. An isekai in Japanese media is when a character is in our contemporary world, and then they somehow they go through a portal of some sort, or they die or something like that, and they end up in a total alternative world. Okay, so it's like usually a fantasy world of some sort. So Peter Pan is kind of like an isekai because it is the fantasy version of the North America, right? And then we've got The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy ends up in an isekai. She ends up in Oz, right? But also Frank Baum, he wrote and published The Wizard of Oz in the early 1900s. Very much predicting what would happen, or not predicting, but, very much in the economy. He's an economist and looking at stuff. And so that also probably inspired Barry to some degree. I know that a lot of men were writing children's books at this time, and a lot of their children's books were weird. So I like to lump them all into one group because they were clearly influencing each other in some way, shape, or form. And we'll figure out why, how, and all of that as we go. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and end this lecture portion. And like I said, anybody who wants to join us for discussions, all you have to do is become a member at the Midnight Scholar Society. And then the link is available to you. And the book collection Start Here post. Bye. Also, the links get sent out. Oh, Denisha, I don't know if you're still here. No, she's not. It was 3 minutes ago. Hold on. Oh no. Let me see. Denisha. Oh, you're here. Okay. Whoo, good. I was gonna say, there's no sound on Patreon. I'm gonna be so upset if there's no sound on this video. But alas, we hope. Okay. Okay. So I ended that. Hopefully there is sound on it. Oh my god, because that's what I'm going to use to post. But if not, I'll just edit and post this video. That's okay too. I just hate that they're making me do so much work. Breaking up videos, because these are huge videos, so sometimes it takes a long time to like chunk up things when they're this big. When they're like 30 minutes, it's not so bad. Okay, everybody, I'm going to stop talking now. I want you guys to talk. And TikTok, thank you everybody for being here. I'm going to head over onto the Zoom now, where we're going to discuss the book, and we'll see you guys next week. Oh, I might